This is Marketing Jam, a show featuring the brightest minds in marketing. Marketing Jam is brought to you by Cyber Impact, the email marketing platform made specifically for Canadian small businesses. Go to cyberimpact.com/jelly, create a free account, and start sending CASL-compliant promotional emails in just a few clicks.
All right, I want to welcome you to another edition of Marketing Jam. I'm really excited because we have Kieran Mathew, the founder of Amplify, on the show, and I am excited and I am in my seat ready to learn some stuff. So Kieran, thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to chat.
Awesome. Hey, one fun thing I saw on your website, you've got a nice photo and quote from Chip Wilson. Tell me about your work with Chip and I assume the Lululemon world that he was involved with.
Absolutely. So I had been running Amplify for about 2 years at the point I connected with Chip, and we'll obviously go into that background information soon, but essentially I've always found him to be quite an inspiring figure. I admire what he's accomplished, but I also admire who he is as a person. I mean, he seems to have really been able to achieve a high balance of building a great family, building a great business, and also just having a great life in terms of hiking, traveling, taking time off, yoga, etc. So I admire what he's accomplished. I sent him a cold email, actually, basically just saying who I was, hoping to connect. And I also went through all of his social pages at that point to give him some feedback on what him/his team was doing and how I thought it could be improved. So I was able to kind of add a little bit of value there. Make a connection, and we've had a number of really great conversations since then, and I've been able to kind of give him and his team a little bit more consistent feedback and kind of thoughts slash research given regarding their social content and sort of profiles there. So
that's cool. And did you do it for himself personally, or like his Kit and Ace brand or his Lulu brand, or what were you doing that for?
Just for his personal brand right now. So I personally have not worked with Kit and Ace or Lululemon yet. I know his family's no longer involved in Kit and Ace, and he's a little bit removed from Lululemon, but of course it's his brainchild. So he's always going to be pretty involved there.
So tell me about your story. You are a incredible mind thinker. You have the knowledge database for people who want to reach those in universities. Is that correct from what Amplify does?
Exactly, yes. So I guess as a bit of background, I'm 23. So in my early years of university, just a few years back, I got very immersed into startup ecosystems in both London, Ontario, and in Toronto. I was studying at the University of Western Ontario, and I really thought I wanted to go to law school. After networking with several lawyers, I realized I really didn't want to go to law school and I didn't want to practice law. So I wanted to figure out what I was interested in and what I was competent at. So I basically just started volunteering my time with some startups to understand that. And a lot of the work I was doing was basically trying to create lean growth plans for those startups to grow in the student market. They didn't have any money to spend. And that was a pretty unique challenge for me as I didn't have a lot of marketing experience. But during that time, I noticed a bit of a gap between the plans that we were creating for the startups and the success that we were seemingly having and what bigger brands like banks, telecom, CPG, retail, etc. was doing on campus targeted to students and digitally. So on campus, they were pretty much just standing under tents or behind booths, waiting for students to engage them. And then on the digital side, all I was seeing was convert, convert, convert. But ultimately, as we all know, once you see enough conversion messaging, you start to tune out. And the average 20-year-old student was seeing about 12,000 marketing messages a day. This was a few years back, and it's actually increased a little bit since then. So naturally, the brand trust was a little bit lower. And I didn't think they were having the results that they really wanted to have in this market. So I started to reach out to some national brands at that point to validate my hypothesis and see if I could help. And unfortunately for the brands, but fortunately for me in some ways, they were having some challenges there. So they were willing to give me a shot and work with me. I was able to work with Menchie's frozen yogurt, as well as a couple other brands, basically evaluating their student marketing programs and student marketing approach.
And all this while
And
you're in university as a university student, sending these cold emails out from your laptop.
exactly, yeah, I was just sending out cold emails, looking for connections, and I was fortunate to make some. So I did a little bit of marketing consulting in the student market as a student. I sensed the bigger opportunity. The first piece of my primary learning was just that these brands weren't engaging students enough to figure out how to create an impactful experience or how to tell a great story on social. They were kind of sitting in a boardroom in downtown Toronto or Vancouver and asking, how should we market to students versus inviting a few students in and saying, does this resonate with you and how can we make it more impactful? So that was a very simple piece of learning, which I could, of course, solve quite easily being a student and having a wide student network. And then the second piece was that they were sharing the same message to all students across Canada. But if you look at, for example, UBC versus Dalhousie versus York versus U of T, the demographic of the students is immensely different. Some campuses are very, very local. Some are very international. So the culture is very different as well. So I wanted to figure out a way basically to involve students in the strategic decision processes, as well as to localize the messaging. So I consulted, realized there was a gap, and then I decided to kind of launch Amplify, and had to figure out what Amplify actually was when I was doing that, of course. So I started heading into my third year at Western. I wanted to really harness the value of peer-to-peer marketing. We can talk about a survey we just recently did at Amplify, but we basically surveyed about 1,200 plus students aged 16 to 23, and 80% of them said that their friends or their peers were their biggest influence on purchasing. So if you can tap into that peer influence through ambassadors, through influencers, and just building communities both digitally and in person, then you have a real opportunity to build meaningful relationships and foster loyalty for the future. So
How did you,
I wanted to figure out a way.
get those answers? Like, how did you find these students to fill out a survey?
Excellent question. So a lot of year one in Amplify was really just finding a way to build a network of students. So being a student at Western, I started to reach out to my peers at neighboring universities, letting them know what I was working to build and asking if they were interested in actually joining the team. Obviously, at that point, I couldn't guarantee a lot of work because I was really just building a brand versus managing tons of accounts. So that was interesting, but basically leveraging my peer group, peer network, asking people to join kind of the business and figuring out what the actual scope of work would be like a little bit later. And then reaching out to various other organizations in the post-secondary market that have chapters on campuses across Canada, aimed at providing hands-on high learning experiences for students, letting them know again kind of.
What did you use? Did you use like SurveyMonkey, or did you have everyone opt in? Do you have a massive MailChimp list or a Cyber Impact list, or what are you using to do this?
Oh, okay. So there's a few different mediums. So we built a network by forming relationships and hiring students on pretty much every university and college campus across the country. So on any campus, we have a marketing analyst, a minimum of one marketing analyst, which is a student there to kind of help us source those local insights. So we do a mix of surveys via our personal email list, as well as campus partnerships with the actual university institutions themselves to get out emails to a high volume of students. But we also do focus groups, small group interviews, etc. So it's a mix of high volume survey distribution and more conversational insights that we're having with the students, which help us kind of conduct research for brands, and that really validates our strategic decisions when we do more experiential campaigns, ambassador campaigns, or influencer work, because we have also built the largest student influencer database in the country now.
So why would a university want to send out a SurveyMonkey link for you, if that's the tool you're using?
Good question. So we have partnerships with these with pretty much most post-secondary institutions across Canada, given that we access campus quite a lot and employ 100 plus students generally per month. So when it comes to getting insights, we're usually able to partner with them by asking questions that will be interesting to them as well, and not only our brand partners. So they're always wanting to learn as much as they can about the current students that are within their community. Obviously, they have a pretty good idea of who they are, given they spend so much time with them. But ultimately, this kind of data is quite valuable to the universities as well on a lot of occasions. So we work to form partnerships with both the schools and the brands that add value to both parties, really. So by asking the right questions, then we can provide valuable data to both parties, and also provide students with payment contests, etc., for filling out our surveys. And then, of course, if they're working with us part-time or full-time, then we're able to provide them with those kind of high learning paid opportunities while they're studying. So it's a fun process.
Do you do anything with New Ad, who has all like the ads that are in the bathroom stalls on campus?
So we are doing a little bit more on the out-of-home media side. We have collaborated with a few different companies which own media space on campus. It is something that we're kind of growing and evolving into doing more and more of. We had originally kind of started as a research consulting company. Then we realized it was more of a need to handle kind of pretty much full service marketing operations for a lot of brands in this niche. So now we do pretty much everything from experiential to influencer to paid media, and again to out of home, but we don't own the ad space. So we're partnering with companies like that to help deliver it.
If someone said you were like the vision critical for university ages, is that a good kind of definition of who you guys are or comparison?
Yeah, that's definitely a fair kind of comparison and assessment. It's basically just full service marketing specific to students, as well as insights to the kind of larger youth segment, given that since we have such a large roster of both students, recent graduates, and even kind of not only high school or post-secondary students, but also high school students now, we're able to get a pretty good pulse on the youth market as a whole. Though when it comes to actually activating and marketing, we're really focusing on the post-secondary market right now.
Cool. What percentage of your business now would be the whole research data versus actually doing the marketing?
It's about, I would say, 30% research slash data, 70% kind of full service marketing right now. So that's kind of the balance, but ultimately we say, and what we do is kind of create fact-based strategies. So on any campaign, we like to get a little bit of a market pulse to understand kind of how our clients are competing in this segment, and what students think of the brand really at a high level. So there's always a research component to kind of the full service marketing, but that's how the balance or ratio would be right now.
Cool. Now tell me about a favorite brand or campaign that you've been working on, or favorite brand you've had the chance to work on. Maybe not right now.
Yeah. So we've been fortunate to we're working with some great brands right now, which is a lot of fun. From kind of beer at Molson to banking with RBC to tech with Skip the Dishes. Skip the Dishes has been a pretty fun brand to work on. Ultimately, food delivery is just so important for students who don't really love cooking and often don't make the time to do so. So it's something that resonates well with that market, and we can actually add value to their kind of day to day by providing them with discounts and promo codes, given that they're often going to spend money regardless on some apps. So we've been running a few fun campaigns with them this semester. One we did during exams was more so an influencer campaign, but we were able to partner with a number of students, primarily in Quebec this time, to share exam-related messaging. So students were kind of sitting in the library, they were starving, and they showcased their kind of skip the dishes experience, and were able to also ultimately provide food and drinks for some of their friends that were sitting around kind of hungry and stressed in the library, but also provide incentives for their peers to order, which were kind of feeling the same way. So we were able to add a little bit of value, put some smiles on some students' faces by providing them with some delicious meals while they were studying, and ultimately just share kind of a pretty fun, positive sentiment on social through influencers. So that's something that's kind of just wrapped up recently with the end of exams, and it was a pretty fun campaign to work on because it's always nice when there's kind of a tangible benefit for students. And when it comes to eating food, everyone's pretty happy. So
Cool. Now, are you an Android or iOS guy?
I'm an iOS guy. I'm using a Mac and I have an iPhone right here. So.
And what are the apps that you can't live without, both personally and professionally?
Let's see. So one actually would be Headspace. I'm a big meditator, so I use that twice a day. I think it's really important to, especially kind of in the startup world right now, I'm about 3 years into this business, to take a step back and kind of practice gratitude in some respects for what we've been able to accomplish, but also just to take a step back and realize that we're kind of floating on a rock in a massive universe, and that what I'm doing is really not that significant when it comes down to it. So there's kind of some peace of mind in there, but it also helps me just kind of maintain a level head and hopefully just be more creative by keeping a radically open mind and kind of hopefully embracing a positive, generally positive mindset. So that's an important app for me. I use email way too much, so that's not very interesting. But Gmail, I'm a big Trello guy as well, just in terms of managing tasks, project management, not only Amplify stuff, but any other side projects. Social-wise, I would say Instagram's definitely my biggest app, not only because we're advertising a lot on it, but just because that's where a lot of my friends are kind of living and playing online. So that would be one. Messenger too. I don't use Facebook at all, really, other than occasionally on my computer. I mainly just use Messenger to communicate. So I would say if I looked at my screen time, I'm sure my top four would probably be Gmail, Instagram, Messenger, Trello, Slack. This is way more than top three, but Slack and then Headspace would kind of be my couple times a day app. So yeah.
Awesome. And any podcasts or books that you want to recommend to listeners?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love the Tim Ferriss show, which is probably pretty typical for people on the podcast, but I admire not only the guests that are on the show, but also the questions that are asked. I find that there's a lot of incredible podcasts out there which are very business oriented, but it's also nice to kind of hear, for example, on the Tim Ferriss show, about biggest failures of some of these people that have accomplished so much, and just other more personal things like what they do in a day-to-day outside of the office is always neat. So that's probably my top listened podcast right now. I'm also a big hockey fan, so I listen to a Spit and Chicklets podcast, which is with few former NHLers, pretty funny stuff. And then a few other business podcasts. One that's really fun is Business Wars, which is basically, for example, they have a whole series on Netflix versus Blockbuster. It's great entertainment. Book-wise, I do read a fair bit. I'm just looking because there's a bookshelf behind me of some of my favorite books and right in front of me. Principles by Ray Dalio would be a really important one that I've read in the last year because I'm kind of trying to build a corporate culture right now, and that's basically like the Bible, I would say, in some respects of how to do that effectively. On a lighter end, I loved Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I thought it really was hyped up before I read it, so I was kind of skeptical as how good it was going to be, but it really lived up to that. Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull was one. What else have I read recently? I kind of just want to turn around and see, but
you got to tell me about this tiger up here, by the way. Tell me about you got to paint. For those that are listening to the audio, there is a giant painting of what are they? Puppy tigers. I don't know if that's what you call them, young tigers wrestling.
So that was something that actually belonged to my grandfather, who I lived with for about 7 years growing up, and he passed away last year. And it was just something that was always in his bedroom. So whenever I'd go spend some time with him, I would see that, and he would always kind of mention that the tigers reminded him of me and my older brother.
Okay.
So it's just kind of a sentimental piece. And when he passed away, it was just kind of sitting on the wall there, and nobody was really kind of spending the time to look at it. So I decided to take it with me and put it up here. It's
Awesome.
yeah, it's a nice little piece.
So dream brand that you want to work with? Dream client?
Um, you know, I think honestly, funny enough, Lululemon would be one that I would be pretty keen on working with. We did just recently do the survey, and one of the findings was that Lululemon is one of the kind of top brands when it comes to well, sort of student slash the youth market's favorite brands. A couple of them were Lululemon, Apple came up a ton, as well as Nike. Lululemon or Apple would be pretty incredible for me to work with, not only because I'm a big brand advocate and I wear a lot of their stuff and I use Apple products a ton, but also because, I mean, when it comes to Apple, for example, their marketing's pretty brilliant. I think I could learn a lot by having the opportunity to understand what their marketing standards are like and how they actually ideate and create. Lululemon, I think it's just because I'm a big fan of what they do and of the brand, so it'd be fun. And I think, I mean, both of those brands are kind of well known for doing a lot of their marketing in-house versus leveraging agencies. So I think it's kind of working with either would be a challenge to get into, but I think part of that challenge is why it's exciting. So.
I know you can't give away all the fun facts and data and it's your mind share, but if I was a brand listening to the show right now and I want to reach people at UBC and I want to reach people at U of T, what are maybe one thing for each school that I should know about that would kind of show off what you know about those two schools if I was a brand trying to reach people?
So funny enough, there's a couple commonalities between those two schools. Both have really significant international student population. UBC is an interesting case because, I mean, U of T is an interesting case because it's a massive school, but it's also a pretty spread out campus. So when it comes to figuring out where to activate, if you're doing experiential work, it can be challenging to find the right location. So U of T, you almost have to see it as a world in itself in the sense that there's international students, there's local students, there's a ton of graduate students as well, and the fact they have a wonderful law school, med school, MBA, etc. So there's a lot of different things going on. You almost have to go a little bit more niche at UFT and identify who your consumers are, and then start asking questions like where they live, where they play, etc. So, for example, if I'm working with a beverage alcohol brand, there's a pretty good Greek sort of fraternity sorority community at UBC. So instead of just finding a way to try to interact with everybody, including med students and MBA students and law students, which I'm sure have a good time, but are a little more focused on education than the social aspects, I might say, okay, how can we put on a great event for this community of fraternities and sororities, and then maintain a conversation which kind of starts a ripple effect across campus. So that's my thought regarding UFT is you kind of have to really identify who your consumers are and go a little bit deeper as to where they live, eat, and play on that campus because it's just a very diverse group. UBC, I would say very international, large international population. So consider, if you're thinking of activating there, consider how that's going to affect your brand. If it's a Canadian brand, you might have to recognize that brand awareness 50% of that population might not know who you are, even though 90% of the Canadian population knows you. So think about that. And then also just think about how your brand may resonate with students, international students, which might not know about you in their neighboring communities. So if I'm a food delivery app, think about what already exists, for example, in China, because there's a large Chinese student population there, and how we can kind of leverage their conceptions of the main leading food delivery app there to channel messaging in a way that will make sense to them. So that would be kind of my first two thoughts regarding those schools. But yeah, it's often a case where I do have a pretty good pulse on kind of high level findings at the universities and colleges. But when it comes to university or college specific strategies, that's where I like to really integrate students into the conversation, because not having gone to UBC or U of T, I can never provide as much insight as students themselves there can. So
nice. Do you have anyone at Trinity Western University out in Langley?
That is actually one school where I have not had to activate yet, but you never know. We've really, I don't know what the population of students is there, but we have really focused on institutions with about kind of 9,000 plus students. There's about between 30 and 40 of those right now, depending on how the populations fluctuate each year, of course. But yeah, so you never know. I love activating in BC, especially when it's an excuse for me to get out there, because it's a pretty beautiful place. So
awesome. Anything else that you want to share with listeners and viewers here today?
No, I think you asked some awesome questions, and I'm really glad that we were able to connect. So I don't think there's anything else pressing that I want to discuss.
Awesome. So if you're looking to reach university students, college students, and it sounds like even high school, Amplify can be the resource both for research and ideas and insights, but also they can do some of the activations and marketing as well. So thank you so much for joining us on Marketing Jam. This has been your latest episode of Marketing Jam. Those that are watching, thank you so much for joining us. Those that are listening, hopefully you've enjoyed these tidbits in your ears and these gems, and we'll see you next time on the Marketing Jam.